What is up? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back and welcome in to another episode of the Jay and Sir podcast. Again, if you guys have better, let us know. But that's I think we'll roll for now. Roll off the tongue pretty well. We are going to do our weekly Mariners recap. Plus, we're going to dive into some Savant pages and some more in-depth analysis on some of the more polarizing Mariners players so far in 2024. The ones that we all have some questions about. We'll talk a little bit about the state of the team so far, how we think they're looking, what we think they need to do. And we'll go from there. We'll talk about the Baltimore series and talk a little bit about the upcoming series with the New York Yankees. As always, do me a favor, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here. I will also link MarinersSUR's Twitter account in the description down below. Do yourselves a favor. If you're on Twitter X, give them a follow. I can always say in all these, one of the most insightful Mariners people that's out there, and just a ton of great info and insight. And if you're someone like me that tries to be a little bit more on the even keel side, again, just a fantastic follow. So give him a follow on Twitter X. How are you doing today, my friend? How's your weekend?
Doing well. Weekend was good. And yeah, excited to talk some kind of Mariners baseball up to this point.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of refreshing after kind of a rough series in Baltimore to maybe look more big picture, for this team. So I'm excited to dive into this. Before we dive into any more players, just want to get your thoughts on an interesting series this weekend in Baltimore. For me, it was, I think I can stomach taking 1 out of 3, but the series did leave me a little bit frustrated overall. What were your thoughts on this series?
Yeah, I would agree. I think going into it, yeah, you getting 1 out of 3 is fine. But yeah, and I agree, you go into this series and you see Baltimore's record, you see some of the numbers that, their players have put up. And I feel like what we saw in the series match exactly kind of what those numbers told. And so I think from a frustrating standpoint, it shows that they're in a different tier than we are. It doesn't mean that it'll be that way at the end of the season, but there's definitely a gap of where we need to close to get to. Cause yeah, they're a very, very good team. You don't see our two starting pitchers get jumped on very often like that in a series. And I think that's something all of us would love to have someday, as a kind of a lineup and team where it doesn't matter who you face, whether it's Corbin Burns or whoever it may be, that you have trust and faith in the lineup that they can get the job done. And that's what we saw. It didn't really matter who we threw. Their lineup was more than capable of putting up some numbers. So I think we saw some good things in the series, but I think my main takeaway is just that the Orioles are really, really good. And we have some work to do, whether it's player acquisition, I think it can come internally too. What, guys like Garver, Polanco, Julio becoming the star that we know he can be, that he's shown before. But we definitely need some things to change, either via kind of performance or acquisition to close that gap.
Yeah, and I think that's all spot on. You look at Baltimore too, and their young superstars are playing like superstars. Gunnar Henderson just off to a ridiculous start this season, homered in all 3 games. You see the numbers that Adley Rush putting up, and then they're getting all the complimentary pieces. There's a couple, like Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins haven't started hitting yet, but for the most part, everybody else in that lineup just contributing. Santander's been great this season. Ryan O'Hearn. And even, today, like James McCann has to start instead of Adley Rutschman. He has an RBI double and just misses a home run. And it's just something right now the Mariners aren't getting their young superstars playing like superstars. The complementary pieces aren't backing them up. And the reserves, Dylan Moore, guys like that, Urias have been pretty solid. But just overall, like you said, it's just got to be something to have a lineup like that where you're going against George Kirby, Bryce Miller. Now, Castillo, I thought, pitched really well yesterday. But to know that you have a chance to just, I feel like when the Mariners go up against some of these ace pitchers, I'm like, hey, if we can get 2 runs over 6 innings, get their pitch count up, I'll take it. But you get a team like Baltimore that can just pound those starting pitchers like it's nothing. And it's just, I'm with you. It looked like the Mariners were a tier behind. Plenty of time to catch up to them. And I can, but definitely work to be done.
Yep.
So next thing we're going to do after, like I said, kind of a frustrating series in Baltimore, but at the end of the day, the Mariners are still in first place. They're 25-22. If the season ended today, Seattle Mariners would be playing playoff baseball, which, listen, we've sat through so many years of not baseball. I will take it however we can get it. We are going to pull up some player pages on Baseball Savant. We're going to dive into it a little bit here. I'm going to get MarinersSUR's thought on some of these guys, give my takes as well. Just so you can kind of see what we're looking at. And obviously, there's been more polarizing players this year. So let me go ahead and pull it up. We're going to start here with probably the most polarizing player now, and that is Julio Rodriguez. So your thoughts on Julio so far in 2024?
Yeah, it's been a rough start for him. So you look at his Savant page, I'm kind of looking at it and comparing it to 2022, 2023. A lot of things are actually very, very similar in terms of like hard hit rate, exit velocity, all that's in the same kind of realm, but his barrel percentage is down. No surprise there. We've seen kind of a slugging tick back there. And his launch angle actually it's actually higher than it was last year, a little bit lower than 2022. So I think that's part of what's interesting is his numbers haven't changed a ton, but his performance has. And his K percentage is up a little bit. But yeah, I would agree. It's just for the Mariners to get to where they need to go. They don't need Julio to be an MVP candidate, but they need him to be in that top 5, 6, 7 range. And so, and he's shown before that he can go on, a tear for a month. And he's kind of started season slow before. So not a huge surprise. And he's shown, I think, some positive direction. We'll take a look at the numbers since 415, and it's been a lot better than it was prior to that. But yeah, just not where, Julio would admit it too, I'm sure, not where he wants to be. And it kind of seems like he'll have a stretch where he gets going, then he kind of falls back into a slump. So definitely a disappointing start for him. And we really need to see Julio pick it up. So I think he has 2 home runs so far, and we're almost a third of the way through the season. So on pace for maybe 7 home runs. And that's just about a quarter of, what you would expect. So hopefully he'll get going and we'll see some power numbers emerge soon, because we definitely need it.
Yeah, and I maybe should have pulled up Julio last. I think he's the most polarizing guy to talk about. I said it in my show today, and I go back and forth on it because, like, listen, even if Julio, let's say Julio's numbers right now are what you get the whole season. You look at the fielding, he's one of the top defensive players in the game. Now, I know defensive sample sizes can be weird over a month, but I think we all agree Julio is a Gold Glove center fielder. And even with like a 655 OPS, he's still on pace, I think, for like a 4 F4 season. Like, he's not a terrible baseball player, but even with what he's doing right now, there is value in that. But if the Mariners want to get to what we hope they can get to, a World Series, they need Julio Rodriguez. Like you said, doesn't necessarily have to win the MVP, but he's got to be like a top 10 player in the American League. I know it's a lot of pressure on a young guy. And certainly this, I hate saying struggles of the Mariners are in first place, but some of the struggles the team has had is all on Julio. But they need to be better. And the good news is, like I said, I don't see a lot of difference here from previous years for Julio. Do you think there's anything to him with the slow starts? Do you think it's just Julio's a streaky player and this is just what you're going to get from him?
I think so. I think that's part of it, is just kind of a streaky player. And I heard on the broadcast, I think it was last night, that he's faced like the most pitches on the inside edge of any player in baseball. So I think too, he just starts kind of pressing at times. And when he does that, he starts to expand. He starts kind of cheating on inside pitches. So I think it's just hard when he gets in kind of one of these slumps to get out of it. And it takes a couple kind of big knocks to maybe get that confidence. But yeah, third year in a row with somewhat of a slow start. So maybe it is just kind of who he is and something that we'll grow accustomed to. And I guess for the case of this year, maybe that's the best case scenario, that he is just a slow start and that we'll see him get going here soon.
Yeah, and I actually think this is, out of the 3 years, I don't know where he's been on May 19th or whatever it is, but this actually might be his best start, to be honest, because I remember his rookie year, he didn't hit that first home run until I think May. I know last year was a really slow start. At least batting average wise, this year's been a little better. And you mentioned it, like the launch angle's been better, and you've seen it in the last couple of weeks. He is lifting the ball a little bit more. Not everything's pounded into the ground. So there's been signs of it. And even in this series, like, today he went 2 for 4. That's a 500 OBP for the day. He had an RBI single. Yesterday he had 2 hits. So it's not like he even had a bad series in Baltimore. I just think our expectations are so high for Julio Rodriguez that we look at that and kind of go, eh. And then you see a guy like Gunnar Henderson go off in this series, and I think it just makes it more noticeable, essentially.
For sure. And I think he is trending in the right direction, which is one positive for sure. He's definitely been better recently than he was at the beginning of the year. So I think that's a positive.
Do you think, now, one thing I've kind of always said on my show is like, hey, Mariners are in first place. They're 25 and 22, and their best player has hit is putting up a 650 OPS. Is major coping on my part, or is there actually, you think, something to that where, hey, this team's hanging in there playing good ball and their best player is yet to take off offensively, at least?
No, I completely agree, because I don't know what our record was going into August
Yeah.
last year, but it was poor enough to where we, didn't buy at the deadline. If anything, we kind of sold off, even though I think it worked well. We had the best month in club history,
Yeah.
but that just, and going into August last year, his numbers weren't great. And so we're surviving better right now than we did last year. And yeah, to be in first place, when Julio does get going, I think we all know that when he does get going, you're going to run off a ton of wins, right? So yeah, I think it's a huge deal to get through 47 games in first place without Julio kind of doing what he can do. So no, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and I think we all agree. I think even most people probably watch this. Like, Julio is going to get going at some point, and when he does, he can carry you to series wins. So, Julio hot streak, even if it happens in New York, that could mean that's how you win 3 out of 4 in that series if you can do it. So, I mean, I think last thing I'll say, if you want to add anything else on Julio, frustrating. I'd love to see him get off to a hot start, especially, he's been my pick for AL MVP now 2 years in a row. Slight bias there, but it has been my pick. And, he's got to get off to better starts if he wants to get that. But I just don't have a ton of concern. It's just more frustration overall. Anything else with Julio you wanted to add? Yeah.
No, I'd agree. I think there's enough positive in his, Savant page to say that it's coming. So yeah, I'm not super concerned. The one thing I will say, I'm just looking at the Savant page, and his base running, it's 14th percentile, and a guy with his speed, that shouldn't be the case. And we've seen a ton of base running gas from him. And so hopefully he can kind of curb that. Cause I mean, it seems like weekly there's one or two just kind of head scratching mistakes on the base pass and, sliding off second base, whatever it may be. So I don't know what's going on there. But hopefully he can correct that.
I kind of feel like that's something that again, that kind of falls into, it's frustrating, but I feel like it's an easily fixable thing. And his sprint speed, there's no way he'll stay in the 14. I mean, I say that, who knows, but more than likely, I don't think there's any way he stays that low in value as a base runner. To me, that's something I just think that he will come out of. It just falls into that. It's super frustrating, but I think that will improve as the season goes along.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right, next guy we're going to pull up here is kind of another polarizing player. I'm going to pull up Mr. Ty France, who, well, I think we got a lot to say about him. There's a couple old friends. I saw Jake Fraley's name. So let's pull up Ty here. Make sure it loads. Ooh, I'll be honest, I have not looked at Ty's page in a while. And real quick, and I'll get your takes. I just have to use this anecdote. I think I mentioned to you on Twitter once. I remember, 2 years ago with Jesse Winker, and he started out in April. His batted ball data, everything looked great, and he was just getting unlucky. And then it was so random. It was like, instead of the results matching, the profile started matching the results. And that just seems like what's happening here with Ty France. 2 weeks ago, this was red. Now, that's ugly. And it's not the worst I've ever seen. It's a lot of gray, but it's really dropped off. Any thoughts here on Ty France?
Yeah, he was a guy earlier in the year where his results weren't good. I was defending him on Twitter in some conversations, saying, like, look at his Savant page. It's red everywhere. There's no way that his results are not going to catch up. And yeah, it's same thing when we pulled it up. I was kind of shocked, because even I looked a week ago and it wasn't like this. And so, yeah, it definitely concerned here. His expecting batting average, expecting slug are both under where it was last year. His strikeout percentage is also up about 7%. And, last year wasn't a good year for him either. And so the fact that the expected numbers are, and I think last year he was a little bit unlucky, but you look at where he was in 2021, where he's really good. And in 2020, he's just got a long way to go. And he went to Driveline in the offseason. Everybody was super kind of encouraged by that. Once again, I was encouraged by kind of what his process was early on. So I don't know, what happened. Was that small sample early on where he just barreled a few balls and now he's kind of regressing to where you would expect? Or I think you might be right that he's kind of started chasing results and maybe kind of fell back to where he was. So I don't know what to do with France. I love him. A couple of years ago, I thought he was going to be like a core impact player, but there's some concerning signs here in his profile for sure. Doesn't mean that he can't break out of it and get going again. And he has, I think, hit a couple home runs in the last week or so, which is encouraging. But yeah, very surprised by a Savant page compared to where it was, a month ago.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, this is actually the first time right now that I've brought it up in like a week. I brought it up in one of my post games, and it was starting to trend down a little bit. I didn't realize it was this, I should say gray more than blue. That's mostly gray. But from your first baseman, that would be fine, I guess, if we were looking at like Leo Rivas's Savant page. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever is your backup to the backup shorts. But for Ty France, you just need more. And I'm with you. Like 2 years ago, I was the same way. It's going to be a core player. Everything about his profile seemed very sustainable, and he was still hitting a double plays. He was always slow, but man, it was just almost like I'm never going to compare anybody to Edgar, but kind of reminded me of that kind of hitting profile a little bit. Not, not the same on base skills, and I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but this drop off has just been, insane. And the fielding and base running, whatever. Like we know Ty's not a great defensive first baseman, and he's not going to be a speedster on the base paths. I mean, there have been some signs. Like you said, he had a couple home runs last week. Had a real nice at bat last night against I forgot who he was facing. It was oh gosh, I don't know. I think who it was. Was
Cano still in the game?
8th? No, Cano came in the 8th. It wasn't Rodriguez. Now, this is going to drive me nuts. Now it doesn't even matter who was pitching, but it wasn't Perez. Why is this driving me nuts now? Who was pitching for the Orioles? Because Cano came in the 8th and he faced Julio and Cal Raleigh. And then he came out. This is just going to drive me nuts now, but I'll look it up here in a minute while I'll let you talk. But yeah, it's just, and my thing with Ty is now we're looking at, he wasn't very good in the second half of 2022. Yeah. He was not very good last year. And now we're looking at, we're not at half a season, but we're at a quarter of a season. So we're going on almost 2 years of just not a very good baseball player at a position where you need good hitting.
Yep, 100%. And, for him, he's never been a big power guy. So I think part of his profile and success was that he didn't strike out a ton, right? He was at close to 15% when he was going well. And it was just more balls in play. And the fact that that's ticking up too just then means when you do put it in play, you have to do more damage. And that's just not really ever been part of his game. So I think, time's running out a little bit for France to have a hold on first base. So I'm rooting for him to get it going and turn it on here soon. I think he's shown that he could be a great player, but like you said, it's been 2 years of this now, that's a pretty large sample size. And in a year you're wanting to contend, I mean, how long can you keep going? So hopefully he'll get going, but the process and Savant page doesn't necessarily indicate anything's going to turn around here soon.
And that's the thing, if this was, a 2019 season, I'd say let it ride out and see if you can get something out of Ty France. But this is a team now that we're expected to, at the very least, compete for this division title. They're in first place in the division, and you need better out of first base. Now, I will ask this before we move on to the next player. A lot of people are talking about Tyler Locklear, to come up and play first base. I would think if they do anything, the first thing they're going to do is what we saw today, Luke Raley playing more first base, and he's been red hot. Do you see anything happening there where they would, I think you're still going to play Ty France. You're not going to keep him on the roster as a bench player, but do you expect to see more Luke Raley at first base here, especially with Canzone, JP coming back so Dylan Moore can play outfield? Do you see a little bit more at-bats coming for Raley at first base?
I definitely do. And I forget who wrote the article, but they kind of indicated that it was either today or yesterday. And I think they were talking with Service at like, hey, it's not going to be a platoon between Raley and France, but you will see a lot more of Raley at first base moving forward. So I think that's the plan.
Yeah, and I think that makes a ton of sense, because you've got Dominic Canzone back, you're getting JP back, Dylan Moore can play more outfield. So I think it makes perfect sense to give Luke Raley some at-bats. And I think that's what they'll do before they make any moves with prospects or a trade at that position. So we're going to move on to the next player. We're going to move on to a free agent acquisition the Mariners made in this offseason, and that is Mr. Mitch Garver. By the way, the pitcher was Colombe for the Orioles, and then Suarez. And so that was the pitchers yesterday. It was just driving me nuts that I couldn't find it. So, all right, let's look at Mitch Garver. And some good things. He's not chasing. Walk rate is good. He's fine in the sweet spot. But everything else pretty rough there. Thoughts on Mitch Garver so far?
Yeah, been a rough go for him too. K percentage is way up. He's never been like below league average, but usually hovers right around there. And this year he's up to 33%. Barrel percent 6.2%. Last year he was at 12.6. 2021, when he was good, he was at 17.4. And so that's, I mean, that's where he kind of makes his bread, right? Is in barrels and doing damage when he hits the ball. He's still not chasing, which is really, really good. What's his whiff percentage? I see that's, I'm trying to see where that was last year.
32.8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this not what you expected from him. So he's shown, I think, some signs as well. I think since 415, he's been a lot better, but I think if you pull up his Savant page from 2023, it's a lot more red. So exactly what you'd expect when he was having a great year. He's doing some things well for sure. So, I don't know if his back's been bothering him because he's missed a couple games twice now with a lower and an upper back issue. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we can get him going, but yeah, definitely not what you were expecting when you signed him. I know personally with him not catching, I really thought that we would see a rock solid year from him and still time for that. But yeah, been a disappointing start so far.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. I wonder if the back is just bothering him more than it's been let on to. He's already missed 4 or 5 games with it. There's no way that it's bothering him those days and just not bothering him at all days he's playing in his. And maybe this could be, I haven't seen a ton of Mitch Garver in the past. He does look a little stiff in his swing. That could just be him. I should probably go back and look at him from previous years. But yeah, it's just, and this matches the eye test. There's been some good moments, and it looks like you said, he kind of this theme of the team this year. It looks like he's coming out of it and then just right back down into, a rough series overall. And, I'm a little bit more patient. Some people ask me, as people say, well, why are you more patient with Garver than Ty France? And my thing is, Garver was really good last year as a hitter. Ty France wasn't. So, we're looking at 40 bad games from Garver. I'm going to be a little bit more patient with Garver than I am France at the moment. And I don't really know what you do here outside of just hoping Garver comes out of this, really.
For sure. Yeah, I think with right field, Haniger, DH Garver, first France, you can kind of rotate and get each of them a day or two off a week. But you're right, they have to start playing because we don't have anybody that can step in and play full-time. One good thing about Garver, I will say, is on four-seam fastballs, he's hitting 303 average this year with the 727 slug. So I think that's encouraging. If we talk about Polanco, it's a completely different story. But basically, sliders and curveballs have been eating up Garver this year, which wasn't the case last year. But I think it is encouraging that he's been doing damage on four seams. It, helps me believe that maybe his, bat speed's still there. And it's just a matter of maybe, pitch recognition or whatever it may be on the breaking balls. And he's hit him before, but I think that is encouraging that he's, hitting 303 with a really high slug on four seam fastballs.
Yeah. And the bat speed there, Savant's in the 37th percentile. While that's certainly not great, I'll be honest, that was one of my concerns as well. I thought he might be in like the 1 or 2 percentile there. Now, listen, like Josh Rojas is down really low and is having a nice season, so it's not the end of the world. But I am encouraged it's a little bit higher than I thought it was going to be, because that was kind of one thing. It looks slow to me. But, my eyes deceive me sometimes. So who knows? So, yeah, I think there is some encouraging signs for Mitch Garver. Again, I'm certainly more patient than I am with Ty France. And like you said, you kind of rotate Haniger in there. It'd be great if one of the lefties, I mean, you could have Canzone get some DH at bats, I guess, against righties, and you could have Rayleigh in the outfield. I mean, you can make it work for sure. But I think the best bet here is just hoping Mitch Garver comes out of this, to be perfectly honest. I don't really, obviously you can acquire somebody, but I don't see that happening with what they paid Garver. I think they're just going to have to hope he gets going, and it, worst case scenario, you platoon him with somebody, but just need Mitch Garver to be better.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, we're going to look at the other offseason acquisition in the offense, and that was Jorge Polanco. So let's go ahead and pull him up. And another rough one. The walk rate really good. The sprint's nice. That's good to see. But other than that, it's a lot of blue. So I was hoping a couple of these guys had more red, because I haven't looked at these either, to be honest. I usually give it a month before I really dive into Savant. Ty France was just a case where it was super interesting, but not pretty. He's not chasing. That's good. Looking for the positives, but everything else. And you mentioned it, he's a guy that's crushed fastballs in his career. And I don't know if it's changed recently, but he's hitting like 100 against fastballs this season. It's like, what is happening to these guys when they come to Seattle?
Yeah, he's hitting a $140 against fastballs with a 220 slug. For reference, last year he hit 291 with a 620 slug. So yeah, I mean, not good. His barrel rate's been cut in half to 6.5% from 14% last year. So it definitely concerns me that he's not hitting fastballs at all. So I don't know if it's like a timing issue or what's going on there. But yeah, his profile once again is he's kind of earned to an extent the results that he's posted so far. So hopefully we can get him going. It's disappointing. He's always been a good hitter. He's only 30 years old, so it's not like we're dealing with a mid-30s player here that you would kind of expect him to not fall off a cliff, but maybe start trending down a little bit. So I'm very, very surprised with where Polanco is at this point, because he's such a good professional hitter that I really thought he would come into Seattle and kind of hit the ground running and be that middle of the order anchor that he's been in Minnesota.
Yeah, another two very similar. He's shown signs. There was that's the Chicago series and Cincinnati series. He belted a few home runs. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Yep.
Jorge Polanco's getting hot. And then he was still walking a lot, but the hitting subsided a little bit. Then he got, I swear, I don't, have all the numbers in front of me. There was like another week where I think he got hot again. And then he's battling an injury with the hamstring. And who knows, maybe that's been an issue all season. It just kind of popped up a little bit more, on against Kansas City. But yeah, it's another guy to me that's like, there's nothing really you can do here. He's going to be your second baseman. You just have to hope he plays better baseball. I think. I don't think there's much you can really do.
Yeah, I agree. And, we've talked about Julio, Garver, Polanco. JP's missed a large part of the season, and going into it, I figured the first four hitters would be JP, Julio, Polanco, Garver. And so going back to your point, we're 25 and 22, and we had barely got any contributions from really what I thought would be our four best hitter. You can throw Big Dumper in there as well, who's kind of produced what you were expecting. Yeah, very, very surprising on the production we've got from that front four and Polanco in particular.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And, I think it depends on how people want to look at it. People could look at it from a negative standpoint and go, they're going to fall off because if these guys don't hit, they're not going to sustain success, which I think is fair. Like if Julio does not get going, Garver and Polanco, they probably won't. But I tend to have more glass half full. I'll try to look at this like, listen, this team's in first place, and these are all good hitters, and we don't need them to be, I'm just asking them to be their career averages, and this team would be 10 times better if they were just hitting at their career norms, essentially. Don't need them to be superstars, but like you said, and I hadn't even thought of it like that, your top four in the lineup, I'm with you, that would have been my 1 through 4. Maybe you Cal or Garver or whatever, but like, and they have done nothing and, have been hurt or haven't played. Last question I'll have here is, I've kind of said Polanco doesn't play tomorrow. I mean, just kind of go with the injury thing. You've got to put him on the IL. You can't have that roster spot just sitting there. And I think you made the point on Twitter today. If he misses tomorrow, he's almost close to the 10 days anyways that he would have just missed regardless.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing there, to be honest, because I forget what day he missed, but it's been 5 or 6 days, and it's like, now, what are you going to maybe kind of rush him? If he couldn't go today, what's the big difference between today and tomorrow? So in my mind, it's like, why not just IL him, give him a few extra days, and he maybe needs. It's not like he's hitting the cover off the ball. You got JP coming back tomorrow. You could put more at second base. So it just, to me, it's a little bit frustrating to be without. You've been playing a man down essentially, and Garver was hurt for a few games, and so I don't quite understand why they went that route. And maybe initially they didn't think it was a big deal at all, and then they got to Baltimore and it kind of cropped up a little bit. But yeah, I agree that it I don't know, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, I guess a guy you bring up probably wouldn't play anyways, but yeah, a little bit of a head scratcher for me since it is going to be close to the 10 days anyways. But hindsight's 2020, I guess, and maybe they weren't thinking it was going to run this long.
And that's my guess. I think with some of the guys banged up, they were like, listen, we still think he's back at this point. That's only going to be 5-6 days. We don't want to miss him for the Yankees series. Potentially. We're already a little, I mean, it sounds stupid to say they're already banged up, because then why wouldn't you put him on the IL? But trying to get that, everybody back in there. But I mean, he hasn't even been well enough to pinch hit or anything, which
Right.
I guess is good because you got to put him on the IL. You can do it retroactively to last week. But I mean, if it's that bad, like you said, what's going to change tomorrow? And tomorrow's kind of been my breaking point. If he's not in the lineup tomorrow, you got to put him on the IL because you're almost there anyways. I mean,
Yep.
the Yankee series is going to be the 10 days. So just put him on there and at least get yourself an extra body that can come up and, even if it's a pinch run or even another bullpen arm or something, just to give you a little bit extra boost in Yankee Stadium. We'll pull up. We do want to pull up George Kirby here in a second. I do have a question for you. Obviously, new guys coming over, struggling. Julio's slow starts have been consistent. Ty Free, all the guys that are scuffling a little bit. Do you think there's anything to do with the coaching here? I tend to believe, like, my thought on it is Polanco and Garver are veterans. I don't think they came over, and I don't think Jared DeHart, Brant Brown, or Scott Service said, "Oh, we're going to completely change your game." I think they signed him to do what they've done. But do you think there's anything here with coaching that's screwing with these guys a little bit, or is it just circumstance?
I don't think so. These guys all have their own hitting coaches in the off season. They spend a ton of time working on their swing. So I don't think with the hitting coaches, I don't think they spend a ton of time on like swing related issues. I do wonder on like game planning and approach. And obviously we're not privy to what they're talking about, but you look at a team like the Orioles who are so aggressive. I think they're second to last in the league in walk rate. So they go up there and they are just hunting a good pitch early in the count. You hear the Mariners kind of mantra is control the zone. So sometimes I do wonder, are we trying to be extra patient and through that, are we kind of not swing at pitches early in the count? Are we not ready to hit? And that's why we're seeing so many fouled back. So, sometimes I do wonder if it's kind of a game planning or approach issue. But I doubt it, but I always kind of find it interesting on some of these super, like Astros, I feel like are the same way where they're very, very aggressive early in the count and it seems to be successful. And obviously you have to have the hitters to do it. They have to be able to do damage. And I don't have the numbers to back it up. Maybe we are aggressive. Maybe we do swing some of the most on first and second pitches, but it doesn't feel like it to me. So I don't know if that's part of it, but yeah, I doubt it's coaching. But it is interesting how players are coming here and struggling. I put honestly more of it on the ballpark and the early weather kind of being cold and hard to hit. And then, like Teoscar Hernandez mentioned, like the batting eye last year, and he just couldn't pick the ball up. And we all know T-Mobile is hard to hit at. And I think sometimes hitters come here and it's so hard, especially early in the year. And I do wonder if they start pressing and then that's what we see kind of carry over and kind of spiral, throughout the year. But yeah, it's an interesting thought though.
Yeah. And that's really my thought on it too. And like you said, and I always say it's like, this isn't to say people can't criticize the coaching, but we're just not privy to what goes on inside the locker room. I talk about pitching changes. Sometimes we just don't know if someone's like, hey, my arm feels a little sore and these things happen. Even Mitch Garver's back, it may be bothering him a lot more than we know. And he's just trying to push through it. And, Scott's not going to come out and just be like, well, he's hurt. So that's why, because then he's going to go, why are you playing him when he's hurt and all that stuff. So,
right.
And like I said, these are all veteran hitters. Julio, maybe a little bit. I could see like, okay, what are they doing with him to get him off to better starts? But with Polanco and Garver, these guys are veterans that came over. I don't think they told them, hey, we're going to, completely change your swings and stuff like that. To your point, though, like I said, the Mariners definitely, and I don't have the data either. I would assume they're one of the more patient teams on first and second pitches. They certainly, like I said, the control the zone philosophy. And hey, some extent it works. They've done a nice job chasing starting pitchers early. Some of that just maybe they're striking out tons. So guys are naturally throwing more pitches. But we've seen it when it works. It's a beautiful thing. They have been, just you see in their patient, they're drawing walks and they're getting that big hit in the gap. And that's got to drive a starting pitcher nuts when that happens to them. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a coaching thing. Now, at the end of the day, the coaches have to be, held accountable. They're the coaches of the team, and the team, if they don't succeed, it's going to fall back on them. But I'm with you. I think it's just guys that need to play better baseball. It's a simple answer, but I think that's what you need.
Yep. Agreed.
Well, we're going to move into the pitching a little bit. Then we're going to talk about maybe some acquisitions or positions to upgrade. Then we'll talk about the Yankee series. As always, if you're watching this Do me a favor, drop a like, leave a comment on your thoughts, and don't forget to hit subscribe. I think the pitching, for the most part, we know is pretty good. We did have a little interesting conversation before we jumped on about George Kirby. So I do want to pull up George Kirby's numbers here while we're talking about that, because Kirby's been and Savant page is beautiful. Nice to finally see some red on Savant page, by the way, for the first time in this video. But you were mentioning it, before he hopped on. Kirby's been, fantastic. In his good starts, he's been Cy Young level good, but in his bad starts, he's been hit pretty hard. Do you have any thoughts on some of Kirby's inconsistencies?
Yeah, so he's made 10 starts, and 4 of them he's let up 4 runs or more. 5 of them he's let up, I believe, 1 run or less, and the other one was 2 earned runs. And granted, in a few, I think 2 of those 4 outings, he's had kind of some rough defense behind him and plays that probably should have been made, and so it could skew those numbers. But yeah, I mean, he was a popular Cy Young pick by a lot of kind of national analysts going into the year. His Savant page looks great, so I don't really have any concerns, but I just more found it interesting that in almost half his outings, he's let up 4 earned runs or more. So this, hopefully we can see some more consistency moving forward. I think his Savant page would indicate that is what'll happen. And I think his track record will indicate, that's what'll happen. And so, like I said, part of it, you can attribute it to some shoddy defense behind him. But yeah, it seems like a few outings have kind of snowballed from him. And then, today in particular, the Orioles were just on everything. And he's has such good command and fills up the zone. And I kind of wondered going into this outing how that would fare against the Orioles' aggressive approach. And so I think it, maybe wouldn't be a bad idea for him to, and even I think today after the outing, he was like, the Orioles just looked way too comfortable at the plate. And so that tells me is, you don't go in trying to hit anybody, but maybe some well-placed balls, inside just to make them move their feet and get them worried in the box, I think could definitely benefit them, just because I do think sometimes guys get way too comfortable knowing that they're going to see like 75% strikes. They just don't have that fear of a wild pitcher, which can benefit guys sometimes. And so I think if he can do it with good intention, he might see that it could kind of help him in some of those outings where teams are kind of all over him, which doesn't happen
and
often,
I think that
we saw it today.
Yeah, and I think that's something I've heard from pretty much every Mariners YouTuber that I watch, or content creator or analyst on Twitter X or whatever that I have a lot of respect for, has all said that same thing about Kirby. He's almost just too in the zone, in the strike zone. And listen, I'm never going to be mad that George Kirby walks 8 batters a year. Like that is, his big selling point. But I'm with you. I think it would benefit. I thought he did better against Kansas City with that, because I thought that was going to be a tough matchup for him, a team that doesn't strike out. And, I thought Kansas City would give him a lot of fits, but he really seemed to nibble in the right way. Like he hit the corners there against Kansas City. We saw Castillo yesterday. Castillo had success against Baltimore. He walked 4, struck out 2, and I made the comment on my post game. I don't think that's anytime you double your walks versus strikeouts, that's not good. But I thought Castillo threw the ball well against this lineup. He knew when to be in the zone, when to just be a little outside of it. Now, Kirby threw 9 shutout innings against Baltimore last year in a start, but so I feel weird saying this, but I kind of thought so too. I just feel like that's a tough lineup for George Kirby. It's like the perfect lineup to face a George Kirby, to be honest, in my opinion, despite, last year essentially.
For sure. Yeah. They lead the league in home runs. So if there is ever a team where a walk or 2 is okay, I think it's against them. And you do it in the spirit of I'm not going to give them anything in the heart of the zone to hit. And obviously it's hard to throw a baseball exactly where you want it. So yeah, I just think he could maybe be a little bit more intentional about, like I said, kind of pitching guys inside off the plate, getting uncomfortable and expanding the zone as well, seeing if he can get more chase. And I think since the scouting reports on him, he may find that teams do chase more often than him just because they are up there expecting so many pitches in the zone. So, but yeah, I think he'll be great, the rest of the way. But yeah, hopefully he can kind of curb some of these, the amount of rough outings moving forward.
Yep. I have zero concern about George Kirby. I think you're kind of in the same boat. It's just hopefully, and get rid of some of the stuff like today, where it's just less of those throughout the year. I do want to go back to the offense real quick. I forgot to bring this up. Want to look at some numbers since it was April 15th, correct?
Yep. Yeah. The start of the Red Series. So I think they won 8 of 10 series since then.
So these are, hopefully you guys can see this okay. This is Mariners offensive numbers, I believe the start of the Cincinnati Reds series. And we've both talked about this. They were actually, I don't know where they rank right now, but for a while there, they're like 5th in WRC plus since this time. And you are seeing some better offensive numbers here overall. Even in Mitch Garver, as much as he's been frustrating, 102 WRC plus, not great from a DH, but it is above average offensively. Even, Julio 121 since April 15th. And I think, I don't want to speak for you here, but we're not trying to just find arbitrary dates and go, oh, see, they're fine. But this is really after that really tough stretch where they were 6-10. We were all just kind of like, okay, what is going on with this offense? And since then, overall, they've gone 19-12. So they're playing good ball. And these offensive numbers are pretty solid, just especially looking at the WRC plus of it.
Yeah. And I'm pulling up. So they are 6th in the MLB in WRC plus at 111, just behind Minnesota and ahead of Milwaukee and Houston. So yeah, it's been, I mean, things were not, there was hard to find any positives, prior to 415, but yeah, for the most part, it's why they're winning series, right? Is that they have been a lot better, but yeah, I mean, Luke Raley, I think he's worth a shout out here. He has been incredible. And this mostly coincides with when he started playing all the time as well. But I mean, he's been a revelation. It seems like every game is getting, 2 hits, and, we're starting to see his power come around. Josh Rojas has been incredible. He's slowing off, but still overall, great. So yeah, it's good to see. So it looks like France, Polanco, kind of Haniger are the 3 main regulars that are under 100. And yeah, Julio 309 average, just kind of missing the home runs. But all in all, really, if they could do what they've done from 415 to now and carry that the rest of the way forward, I think it should be a playoff team. And then hopefully, Garver, France, Polanco, Haniger, we can see better performances because, realistically, Rayleigh, Rojas, Raleigh, Moore aren't going to do what they've done. But you hope they can still be productive hitters, which I think all 4 have showed that they will be in some capacity. But yeah, it's interesting that they have, I think, performed a lot better than people have realized.
And I think what it has been, at least for me, if I'm not bringing up these numbers and you're just asking me like an eye test, I think it's just been still some inconsistencies. And I think that's just this team. They're going to be streaky because they do strike out a lot. They're a team that's kind of, a little bit of a 3-true outcome team, just for lack of a better term. I think that's going to lead to some streakiness with them. But, today's kind of an example. I actually thought they had some good at-bats against Corbin Burns in the game. I don't think they looked lifeless against him. I know struck out 11. That's frustrating. I get it. But I thought they put some decent swings on the ball. They have looked better overall. And you look at the guys that are struggling here. Clase's not with the team anymore. I think Urias, a lot of the key is just getting back to that platoon. They've kind of had to go away from with Polanco's injury and JP being out. And I think a key here too, now listen, it's 29 plate appearances, and I know you've talked about it on Twitter, like JP was heating up before getting hurt. I think it went unnoticed a little bit because the overall numbers weren't there, but getting JP Crawford back, it should be huge for this team. And like you said, Rojas has cooled off a little bit, but still overall has been fantastic. Cal's been great and clutch on top of it. Dylan Moore, I mean, my gosh, he is
incredible.
Just a saving grace for this team. And then Julio, to me, really the polarizing one. Want that slugging to go up, but I mean, a 121 WRC plus Gold Glove defense, it's probably a 5-4 player over the course of the season. So, I can't be too mad at that overall, despite some frustrations.
Nope, I'd agree. And Haniger at 71, I think he's looked a lot better in the last week after he had a day off. And so my hope is, and I think the plan is that he will get a day or 2 off a week. And so I'm pretty confident with that we'll see him be at least like a league average bat moving forward. I think they just played him so much and that wasn't the plan. And he just seemed completely worn down at the plate and in the field with that. So hopefully we'll see kind of him smooth out his performance as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. And that's, getting JP back helps all that. Cause then one more can play some outfield. So it's, sometimes people realize that every position matters for that. I haven't gotten on Scott for playing Mitch Haniger because what's he supposed to do? Garver had to miss a week with the back injury. Polanco's out. JP's out. So, yeah, you've got to play Mitch Haniger every day right now. You don't have a choice. But I'm with you. I think some more days off for Mitch Haniger. We've seen when he's come back from those days off, he's looked pretty good in my opinion. Now, again, I don't have the numbers on what he's done after days off, but I think for the eye test, at least he's passed it. And I think that's going to make him, a more valuable player as well. You've got a lot of kind of role players. Urias has started every game at third base the last week. That's not what we want his role to be. So I think getting these guys back will really help for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect. And then last couple things we'll talk about, positions you'd like to see the team upgrade here as we get a little closer to the deadline.
Yeah, I think for me, it's fairly obvious. It's, that first base, DH, corner outfield. Corner outfield, you got Canzone and Rayleigh, who I feel pretty good about. Haniger is a role player I feel good about, and Moore can kind of stick out there as well. First base with France, unless he picks out, I think that's like an obvious upgrade. And then with Garver, hopefully he gets going, but if not, DH as well. So somewhere in like somebody that can play in that space, I feel good on the infield. I guess second base technically, but part of it is they really need one of Garver or Polanco to get going, because it's hard to go upgrade 2 or 3 spots at the deadline. Right. There's just only so many players out there. So they really need it to be like 1.5, I would say, or maybe it's 1 impact bat and then a platoon or a role player somewhere. So some of it has to be internally, but yeah. One player I'll just name drop one is if the Diamondbacks were to fall off, I think Christian Walker would be an absolute perfect fit for the roster. Doesn't strike out a ton, hits 30+ home runs. We saw in the series against them just a very, very tough at bat. So, he would be like the ideal dream scenario. But yeah, I think one of those positions, corner outfield, first base, obviously DH don't have to play in the field, but that'd be my thoughts. What about yours?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you made a great point too. And I've had people like, oh, we got to upgrade here, and here. I'm like, you're not going to acquire 5 players at the deadline. Some on this roster is going to have to step up and be better. Love Christian Walker. I think that would be a great addition. If you're looking a little more low key, maybe there's something you can do where you get like Brent Rooker and Austin Adams from Oakland. I would love another reliever. I'm kind of at the point where I'm just not trusting Gregory Santos coming back. It's going to be, if he does, great. But I'm not like counting on it. I would love another reliever, and it's not a knock on what the current bullpen is doing. Stanek looked as good as he's looked all season last night. That splitter, I was like, oh my gosh, what if this is Ryan Stanek, then we're in good shape. And Trent Thornton, I think, has been good. I listen, if we're in September or in Houston with the division on the line, I don't trust Trent. I feel bad because Trent Thornton's been good, but I'm not going to Trent Thornton as my first right-hander out of the bullpen to face, Jose Altuve in your biggest spot of the season. I want, and, eventually you just can't have Munoz get 5 out saves all season. He's going to need, some rest. So for me, bullpen and just bullpen guys are always out there. I've name dropped this guy 50 times, but if you called Oakland tomorrow, I think you could get Austin Adams in like 2 minutes from Oakland, and they're already falling off. They're now like 11 games under 500. And it doesn't have to be like, I've said, you're not getting Mason Miller. He's going to cost you way too much. He's got like 6 years of club control. The A's are not going to give him to you for a mid-level prospect. But guys like Adams, and I'm sure there's other names out there. I know that, you got Tanner Scott in Miami, Justin Lawrence, Colorado, Urseg in Oakland's bullpen as well. And I'm sure I'm missing names. Every team seems to have one bullpen guy that's lights out somewhere in there. But I think that's like the easiest one to get. But yeah, I'm with you. I think first base, if Ty can struggle, Christian Walker would be just a dream to have Christian Walker here. I think just a perfect fit for this team. And then, yeah, maybe a corner outfielder, maybe get Tommy Pham for pretty cheap from Chicago, something like that, even though they just signed him a few weeks ago. Those would be my positions, would be everything you said, and then a reliever.
Yeah, no, reliever is a good point too, because I agree that while, Stanek and Thornton have been okay, and Thornton's been actually really good, it's just getting like another high octane guy in the 8th or 9th inning with Munoz, I think would be a really good idea. Assuming that you do make the playoffs, I think you do need one more arm in the back end for high leverage.
Yeah, and I always want to put out, like, Trent Thornton's been really good. I am a Trent Thornton fan. I hyped him up last year. I thought he did really well. I just don't. And maybe part of it too is like I was so pumped because we had Munoz, Brash, Santos, and I was like, oh my god, you have a lead after 6 innings, you're not losing a game. And I was like, oh, Thornton's kind of a perfect secondary guy, and now he's like your second right-handed reliever. I'm just not quite like, oh yeah, Trent Thornton's coming in bases loaded, nobody out. Whereas with Matt Brash, I'm like, yeah, he'd get out of this giving up no runs easily. So I think that's a little bit of it too. Last thing we'll get into here, thoughts on the upcoming Yankees series, a 4-gamer against a team that I actually don't look at the standings all that much outside of the West. They're above the Orioles. They have a better record than Baltimore. I think they've won 7 in a row. Judge, Stanton, or Soto. I think Stanton's having a better year, but Judge, Soto, Stanton, and a pretty lights out pitching rotation. It ain't going to get much easier going to New York tomorrow.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a tough series. And I think Anthony Volpe's been amazing too. But yeah, I mean, with Soto and Judge, they both haven't been great. Judge got off to a slow start, but he's back to being Aaron Judge. And to your point, it's that pitching rotation's been incredible. So I think tomorrow is probably our best chance at a win with Gilbert versus Marcus Stroman, who Stroman's been good. He's just kind of who he is mid to upper 3s ERA. So hopefully Logan Gilbert comes out and shoves and we can get some runs off Stroman, because I think after that we face Schmidt, Nestor Cortez, and then Luis Gil or Hill. I don't know how you pronounce his last name, who all three have been great. And I think, Schmidt, Gil are young, so maybe we can hit them. And with our pitchers, I have faith that any of them on any given night can go out and give us, better than a chance to win. I mean, Yankees have been red hot. They've got, firepower and star power that's performing very well. And so if we could get a split, I would be absolutely thrilled. And Clay Holmes, their closer, I think, is rocking a 0 ERA on the year too. So another team where you don't want to be behind in the 9th inning. They've guys like Luke Weaver have pitched well, but looking at their bullpen, that's maybe like their weakness, if you want to call it, is outside of Holmes. It's a guy like Weaver's maybe their 2nd or 3rd best reliever this year. But can he keep that up? I don't know. And then some other guys I think have some rough numbers. So I'd be thrilled with the split though. It'll be a tough, and that park always seems like it's a crazy place to play with the short porch. So, but we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. Honestly, I think it'll be a good challenge, and I think we can get a split. So that's what I'm hoping for. But yeah, a win tomorrow would make that task much, much easier.
Yeah, you win tomorrow, then you can sit there and go, listen, just find a way to win one. And I want to be clear, I think you're the same way. I'd love for the Mariners to go in and sweep, win 3 out of 4. That would be amazing. We will both take that any day of the week. But when you're playing teams like this, it's a lot about survival. What you don't want is to go in and get your clocks clean, get swept, fall back under 500, and then kind of have to start over. If you can go in and split, you play Washington, who's better, but still not a very good team. And then your schedule does start to finally open up a little bit. You got the Angels, I think the White Sox coming up here soon. And yeah, to your point, like hopefully the Mariners can take advantage of that short porch a little bit too, in right field and get some of their lefty bats to hit home runs there. And then it's funny. You mentioned Luke Weaver. I was watching a couple of Yankee games because they're usually on early in the mornings on weekends. So I turn on the game. And I got to say, I wonder if Jerry DiPoto is kind of a little bit like, see, I maybe knew Weaver's been pretty decent. Maybe that wasn't the worst acquisition of all time, because he's actually looked pretty good. You can see why the Mariners did acquire him, last year.
Yeah, he's been, I thought he had good stuff last year, just didn't put it all together. And so far this year he has. So yeah, he's been very good.
And that was the thing. And the last thing I'll say, it's like with Weaver last year, I actually thought same thing. He pitched pretty well that game against Oakland. I think he just got put into tough spots. He had a spot start for Kirby, which made it look worse. And then that game in Tampa, that was kind of, I think, the famous one that he ended up, I think, blowing the lead in the 7th, 8th inning. I thought Scott left him in an inning too long. He actually pitched really well in that game. They just asked one too many outs from him. But he actually overall, I don't think he's terrible with the Mariners last year. I think he just got put into some tough spots. But yeah, it should be a fun series. I always look forward to playing teams like this. I say that now, then during the game, I start getting frustrated. Should be a good test. And what I want to see is, like I said, at least a split and competitive games. If you lose 2 of them, you lose 3-2, it happens. I don't want to see where the Mariners have to squeak out miracle wins and they're getting blown out 10-0 in the other games. I just want to see them competitive and show that they can compete with teams like Baltimore and New York come playoff time.
Yep, completely agree. And I think they can. So yeah, hopefully they show that this week.
Yeah, anybody that's not Baltimore, I'll take. Maybe that's famous last words, but man, that lineup is just relentless. There's nothing easy about facing Baltimore. I mean, even their hitters are still, Hayes and Mullins are still good players. So looking forward to not playing Baltimore for 4 games. So I appreciate you joining me as always, my friend. Thank you so much. If you want, come on for a post-game recap this week. We'll talk about it. Thank you guys all for tuning in and watching. Remember to smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, and leave a comment down below. MarinersSUR Twitter account, Twitter X account will be linked in description down below. Like I said, if you're on there, if you're not following him, you're missing out on some great Mariners content. And we will be back maybe in the middle of the week. Never know. If not, for sure next Sunday with a weekly recap. I appreciate you coming on, my friend, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to next week.
Anytime, man. Have a good one. Take care, everybody. And as always, go Mariners. Peace.